a show that covers what's going on in the North Shore and provides insight into our local villages and its representatives. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Johnson, and welcome to another segment of From the Source. This week, I'm happy to have the Superintendent of Manhasset School District as my special guest. Dr. Vincent Butera took the reins as Superintendent of Schools in 2017. The Manhasset School District is comprised of 4 schools: Muncie Park Elementary and Shelter Rock Elementary Schools, which cover K through 6, Manhasset Middle School, which covers 7th and 8th grades, and Manhasset High School, which covers 9th through 12th grade. During his time with the district, he has worked on many issues facing students, the district, its infrastructure, and staff. Here to speak about what's going on in the Manhasset School District is Dr. Butera. Hello, Vincent. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Liz. Privileged to be here.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know my viewers would like to know why you decided to choose education as your profession. I mean, you're great at it. Obviously, you've done it in a number of different school districts, but we're thrilled to have you here in Manhasset.
Well, thank you, Liz. Education was actually one of 2 career choices for me. The other was law enforcement.
Really?
I had my eyes set on being an FBI agent, SWAT, and during my college years, I focused on education and sort of kept going back and forth. And after graduation, I received a letter to go into the police academy, and I had to make one of those life choices.
Wow.
And I made the choice to stay in education, and it has absolutely been a privilege to be in this profession. It's my 26th year in education.
Wow.
I've been a teacher, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a principal, assistant superintendent, and currently superintendent. And by far the best part of the job, and the reason why every morning I have the opportunity to wake up with a smile knowing I'm going to a place I love, is because you have the ability to impact the lives of students. And there's no greater joy than interacting with students on a daily basis. Again, I'm very fortunate to be here, and the reason why I chose this profession is really because of the impact on kids.
And that's so important, you know, that relatability to a young mind, and, you know, it's amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So now you've been superintendent of schools for Manhasset for about 2 years. And you've successfully completed a nice transition, because it's very hard going from one supervisor to another. You have a totally different style. Personally, I've seen you listen a lot before you speak, which is amazing. I think that more people need to listen. And though I do understand you tweet. Talk to me about the transition that took place and how you were able to direct the changes.
Sure. The transition really began before I was hired. And first and foremost, when I was considering whether or not to make a move, and the Manhasset opportunity presented itself, I did have an opportunity to meet with the Board of Education, a number of times prior to my appointment. And it was quite clear after interacting with each of them that the focus was on students, the focus was on community, the focus was on exactly what I wanted. So as I began to speak with the board and get to know them, it was clear that our values were shared. And as a result, I had the ability to really hit the ground running, knowing that there was no significant issue that needed to be addressed on day one, which gave me the luxury really of building relationships, listening to many different folks. And over the past 2 years, a lot of what we've done has really been based on what we've heard from our parents, from our students, from our faculty, from the Board of Education. So I really am indebted to the many people who made that transition such a smooth one. And for me, it's been invaluable in really laying the foundation for what we've done and what we're about to do as well.
Talk to me a little bit about what you're about to do, because you have gone into the listening mode, heard the people, and you have put together a survey, okay? That survey had a response. You surveyed staff, you surveyed students, you surveyed parents. What did you hear from them?
Sure. Well, before I begin to speak about the survey specifically, I want to just extend a debt of gratitude to the SCA, which is a fantastic organization here in Manhasset. They're the group that actually helped fund the survey. And the original intent was to make sure that we were hearing the voices of the many different stakeholders within this community. And we know face-to-face conversations are valuable, but we knew there were thousands of individuals out there who had a voice as well. And through a process of listening to parents and students and teachers and faculty members, we were able to really develop a survey that reflected a lot of what we wanted to hear. And about 16 months ago, we were able to administer that survey, which I'm thrilled had a response rate that was significantly higher than you usually get on surveys.
Okay.
Our response rate for our 7 to 12 students was over 85%.
That's amazing.
For our faculty, it was over 65%, and for our parents, it reflected over 40% of our families. In survey land, that's incredible. You never see those results.
Absolutely.
And we were able to use our students to help convey the message and its importance, and the findings have really helped shape what we've done, and I'd love to be able to speak a little bit more about that.
Oh, absolutely. So last year, I know also that there was a big transition that took place with 2 new elementary school principals coming in, with the retirement of Robert Ketzik in Shelter Rock and the transition of Dr. Kendall to administration. How did that, I mean, that's a big impact.
Sure.
Change. How did the transition go, and how do you feel the staff ensured that smooth transition?
Overall, I've been very pleased with the transition. Going into the position 2 years ago, we knew one of the challenges would be that there would be some turnover amongst the administrative staff.
Okay.
The staff was getting to that point where we knew retirements were coming, and we planned for them. And over the last couple of years, we've had nearly 10 positions change, including the 2 elementary principal positions that you speak about. And through the process of interviewing, recruiting, we were able to find candidates that we were excited about. And first and foremost, and what I can share about not only the 2 gentlemen that you referenced, but also a number of the other administrative openings that we've filled, is that first and foremost, these are student-centered individuals. They care about kids, they want to impact kids, and they're also learners. We recognize with any transition there'll be some learning opportunities, and are the individuals in these positions open to receiving feedback? And what I found is not only with our elementary principals, but some of the other positions we've filled, they absolutely are. So overall, I think it's gone very well. And first and foremost, it's because the priority was really on 2 key goals. 1, building relationships, and 2 is really taking the time to assess the system. And Manhasset, what I found, is an excellent system in so many ways. It serves students so well in many ways, but not unlike most organizations, there are always opportunities for growth. And by being deliberate and thoughtful, we've been able to listen and find those areas of opportunity, and that's where we're going to devote our energies going forward.
That's great. That's wonderful. A lot of time has been spent on getting to know the parents, teachers, and students, as well as staff. With technology changing constantly, what do you think the biggest challenge Manhasset schools face in the future?
One of the challenges Manhasset faces is, and it's no different for many other, is with technology becoming such a greater part of our lives, it's also important that we keep in mind what we value and what we want to focus on, because a lot of the skills that we need to make sure students have going forward are skills that technology can't simply substitute for.
That's true.
It's why a lot of our focus has really been on the social and emotional part
Right.
Because the academic skills are invaluable, we know that, but we also know that as students leave us, they're going to encounter challenges, they're going to encounter stressors. They need to be able to be equipped with the skills to be able to deal with those situations, ask for help when they need for help, be able to monitor their emotions, be able to interact with people who might be different than they are. And these are all interpersonal skills and social emotional skills that technology can't simply substitute for. So I think that the priority for us and something we need to be mindful of is when can technology actually impact positively, and when can we simply look away and do and develop skills in a different way and not simply rely on technology. Go into any cafeteria, go into any public setting, and you'll see individuals on their phone. It's part of our lives.
Right.
The genie is out of the bottle. But I think for us, we also need to be mindful of time when students should be interacting with technology and when perhaps it's okay to put the device down and focus on skills a little differently.
Right. One of the things I see a lot, even with babies, to divert a child's attention, is to give them the phone, and or having some sort of handheld device, whatever it is, whether it's an iPad or it used to be, I forgot what they're called. My kids used to play them, and the hardship was to be able to actually have eye contact with someone else. Do you find that that's a greater challenge now, even in the earlier years, when the children enter into the school district in kindergarten, and how is that being handled today?
Sure. Having 2 teenage children myself, I know firsthand how much a part of their lives technology is and the phone is. For our students, they're no different. What I find is that students are incredibly resilient. It's really a matter of what we focus on. And in classrooms where the focus is on listening, on being present, on interacting, students will respond. And I've had the opportunity to interact with a number of different classrooms over the course of the last 2 years where we actually talk about that.
Really?
How do you stay present? How do you look someone in the eye? How do you ensure that you're listening to what they're saying as opposed to simply interrupting or waiting for your turn to talk or jumping in before the person has finished talking? Those are all skills that are invaluable. And what I find is that students, if provided the environment to be able to focus on those skills, will. Does it make it more challenging when you have devices and students are so used to having them? Absolutely. But I think that's our responsibility as educators, is to put the focus where it needs to be. And as we continue to focus on not only the academics, but the social emotional, a large part of that is going to be teaching students those skills of listening, of being present, of being able to respond appropriately. And those are all skills we need to teach. We can't simply assume students are going to learn it on their own.
No, that's true, because I don't think the parents are teaching them that either, unless there's a timeout kind of with no technology. And I even see it in my own family. We go and sit on the porch for a little peace and quiet, but yet we're constantly referencing our phone. And it's amazing how it just is such a part of our lives.
Absolutely.
So the Manhasset Public School Climate Survey asked students, parents, and staff members for feedback on most important dimensions of the school climate. Can you tell the viewers what valuable feedback you received?
Sure. With any survey, it's human nature to focus on the areas of deficiency or shortcomings. I think it's also important to spotlight really the many sources of pride here in Manhasset. What I found really astounding is across the board, parents, students, teachers, administrators, there was a clear sense that there was really a high expectation for learning, that there was a focus on learning standards here in Manhasset, and that was across the board. The percentages of students and parents and teachers who really agreed that Manhasset focuses on academics was over 85–90% for all groups. You don't see that often in many places. There was also recognition that the opportunities provided here in Manhasset are quite broad. And we should be proud of that. Everyone that's been part of the Manhasset community for the last number of years has been part of making that a reality. So it's important to note that there are so many positives. With that said, we did administer the survey to find opportunities for growth. And where perhaps the light was most bright is on that social emotional component. What kept resonating with me as I looked at some of the responses was really the large percentage of students, nearly 25% of our students, who agreed with the statement that we're sad on a regular basis. That's a large number of students. Sadly, it's below the national average. And I think that reflects a lot of the societal changes, which we can go into as probably another show.
Right.
But for me, that's a clear-cut indication that we have some work to do. And as I shared this information and survey results with the many different individuals who were part of it, it resonated with them as well, which again provides a great opportunity for us to sit down, put our minds together and say, how do we impact that number? So when we administer the survey in a year or two from now, that number will be a lot less. Again, what we focus on grows. And for me, the social, emotional, and academic well-being of our students needs to be first and foremost on our minds.
Now, from there, I know you specifically worked on an area, which was the transition from elementary school to the secondary school. And you worked really hard on it. You had received a grant. I think that you even got money from the CA. Talk to me about what you have put in place, or if it's not 100% in place, that it's almost there.
Yeah. I believe what you're referencing is what we're calling a social and emotional wing.
Yes.
And it really is a space for students to be able to access support. What I found most astounding as I spoke to students was the number of students who really weren't aware of what a social worker in a school does or a school psychologist does. And our counselors, many of them know counselors from the college process.
Right.
We knew that in order for students to really be able to access support, one, they needed to be able to know where to go.
Right.
And secondly, we needed to make sure that we were providing the resources in a setting where students would want to go and access help. So as part of the capital projects proposition, which the community so generously supported this past May, we were able to get approval to develop a wing, renovate a large segment of the secondary school building where we would be able to house our 7 to 9 counselors, social workers, psychologists in a warm, inviting place where students would, one, know where it is, and two, would want to go. Because step one is identifying that you have a need. Step two is actually asking for help and knowing where to go. So for us, it's creating the conditions so students can actually access the help that we have. They just simply might not know about or simply don't know where to go.
Right, and sometimes there's a stigma attached with having to ask for help. How is that being addressed?
A big part of it is education, and we know the whole notion of mental wellness. There's a lot of misunderstanding about mental wellness, and for us, first and foremost, we wanted to surface the conversation. Because mental wellness is not about someone who perhaps is crazy or someone who, and you can use the adjectives, there are many adjectives.
Right.
You know, when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about fathers and sons and daughters and wives. These are normal people who are going through some struggles. So for us, it's stigmatizing that and making it okay to ask for help. So again, a big part is education. And last year, we put effort into really building the capacity of our secondary school staff. We put them through a training, Mental Health 101, which was spearheaded by our mental health team. And we're one of a few districts that have put together a mental health district-wide team made up of all our social workers, psychologists, guidance counselors, nurses, and we meet 4 to 5 times a year. And the focus is on what do we need to do to continue to raise awareness. And a big part has been on education. Big focus has been on education. That will continue this year. And what the community will see is, whether it's students, whether it's parents, whether it's our faculty, a continued focus on surfacing and building an understanding of what mental wellness is, and then also talking about some steps we can take. The SEL wing that we spoke about is one step, because we designed for what we want, and we knew we needed to redesign where this support is.
Right.
And I am so grateful. Again, the SCA has been such a valuable partner. Not only did they fund the survey, but they provided us $75,000 to help.
It's amazing.
Offset some of the costs for the wing, which we are in the process of finalizing plans for, with the intent of having it built in the summer of 2020.
Oh, so it's coming up?
Coming up.
And where would that kind of be located in the scheme of things? Just from what I remember, I mean, the middle school is more, I don't know how you put it, it's on lower level, and also to the right side, I guess. Is it going to be, where's it going to be?
Sure. The space that we're working with is the space that currently is the former middle school main office.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
And then extends all the way down to where the current technology room is. So the current technology room will stay, and we can certainly speak about that program a little bit. But really, the space from the book room, which is adjacent to it,
right,
all the way to the middle school main office, would be the space that would be redesigned.
That's a nice piece of real estate.
It is.
I think that will work nicely.
Huh?
So I know this year you had a big push with the infrastructure and the buildings, and to keep part of this whole mental wellness is also the feeling of safety and security with the children. And after the last 2 years or more of hearing these horror stories that have occurred with someone coming in and shooting in the school, those, even thankfully nothing happened here, but it resonated with the children. The fear factor, even though my daughter and son both spoke so highly of all of the training that they received in order to, evacuate and whatever, and just to be calm and keep the students calm. But you've added an extra layer of security. Let's talk to me about that.
Sure. We have a strong relationship with the local police department, and I can't speak highly enough of the POP officers that we've worked with. And we are in constant communication with them. And the secondary school principal, Dr. Schlanger, and I meet with the police officers often to talk about where we are in terms of security and what the next steps are. And a lot of our next steps on the physical security side have really been guided by input from our safety specialists from BOCES, the Nassau County Police Department, and also our representatives from Homeland Security. We meet with them often to talk about what is the next level of protection for us, knowing that there's a balance.
Right.
We don't want to necessarily create prisons. We want to create an environment where students feel as though they're part of a school, they're safe, and yet we know that there are certain steps that we need to consider that years ago we might not have had to, which led us to implement and really install security vestibules at each of our buildings. So come September, they'll be in place, security vestibules, so when parents come in, visitors come in, they'll be buzzed in, and then they'll be within 2 sets of locked doors where they'll be able to interact with someone from the building who can then let them in if they are someone who needs to be in the building. Prior to that, it was simply the outer level of security where you would get buzzed in and then you would be in the building. That was a strong recommendation that we knew we needed to consider. And that'll change some of the perception, but gladly what we found is, because for all the buildings, we actually were able to implement it in June of last year.
Right.
And what we found is people adjusted, but that's another level of security that we didn't have years ago. But I do want to make the point that with all of the physical security upgrades that we've considered, and we'll continue to consider more, whether it's additional cameras, whether it's additional door mechanisms, we'll consider anything that is reasonable, but we still want to make sure the focus is on what even the U.S. Secret Service would say should be our priority, and that's building those connections within the building. That's going to do more to protect kids than simply focusing on the physical security, which again, we need to do, but we also need to make sure we're focused on developing strong connections so that when a student needs help, they know where to go. And even more importantly, when someone's friend needs help, if they're not accessing it, someone is stepping up and speaking up so that we're protecting each other.
Right. That's a really good thing to do. So tell me about the new initiatives that are going to be implemented in the upcoming school year for 2019-2020.
Well, there are a number of initiatives that we've already begun, and for us it's really making sure we're strengthening them. I think the one that really comes to mind is our Teachers College Reading and Writing Initiative. Through the work of Dr. Chowsky, as well as many of our talented administrators and teachers, we were able to pilot Teachers College reading at the lower level, K-1, and we put a plan in place to be able to phase it in over 3-4 years. Because of the feedback we received, we began to think about how do we accelerate this, because the program is so renowned and the feedback was so positive that next year it'll be implemented in all of our K-2 classrooms, and going forward it'll be implemented in 3, 4, and then grade 5 classes. We wanted to ensure a clear and common experience for students, and what that also does is allows us to learn from each other. And the conversations that were had amongst the teachers that were part of this program really showcased the value of having a strong program district-wide, and through her efforts we were able to not only get the funding for it, but even accelerate on our plan to implement it. So that is perhaps the one initiative that has received the most attention. And going forward, a lot of our efforts will really be around making sure that we are focused on the STEAM aspect, the science, technology, engineering, and math. And we have a technology program. We have Project Lead the Way to focus students on those skills that we know they're going to need in the 21st century. And over the course of the year, we'll actually be talking about how do we design an innovation lab that will allow our students to really build these skills, not only from elementary, but even through 12th grade. And through the work of Mr. Elkins and Dr. Adcroft, we've been able to make significant strides. But that's another area where we want to make sure we're continuing to really devote our attention and our resources.
Wonderful. That's very exciting. Well, that's all the time we have today, and I want to thank you so much for coming onto this show. I hope you'll come back, because I want to hear all of these great ideas that are being implemented and what the future looks like for Manhasset.
It would be a pleasure. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching From the Source. Stay tuned for more in-depth interviews with members of your community.